I'm Trevor Williams with Global Atlanta. I'm here with Dr. John Endicott. We are getting ready to start our Authors Amplified launch event here, our series of author talks. And we're going to wait for maybe one more minute to see if we can get the full complement of people to come in. And what I'm excited about here is we've got quite a mix of diplomats, folks that are involved in international education, consultants, family members of Dr. Endicott. So it's a really exciting mix of people here. We've had about 83 people sign up, something like that. So hopefully we'll have a good crowd, and the crowd size will kind of determine the way that we go about this. There may be some chances for us to have our cameras on and ask questions audibly. Usually we tend to keep people muted and silent and use the chat function for the Q&A, but I thought we wanted to sort of replicate the idea behind this event, which is, when we get back to being able to host in-person meetings, the idea is to have a roundtable and have a chance for dialogue with our authors. To give you a sense for why we chose to do this series, looking at the Authors Amplified name, it kind of tells you a bit. We feel that sometimes the voices in foreign affairs and international business in Georgia can be, if not silenced, muffled a bit when it comes to policy matters. At times, young people think if they want to have influence in policy, they need to go to Washington, D.C. or New York. And sometimes these great thinkers and influential leaders are hidden away at our universities, and we wanted to kind of change that. Of course, the practitioners in these fields know them, but I don't think we understand locally what treasures we have underfoot. So today, in that vein, we're going to talk with Dr. John Endicott. Dr. Endicott is the president of Woosong University in Daejeon, South Korea. He's vice chancellor of the Solbridge International School of Business, which he started. He spent 28 years in the United States Air Force, and we're not going to read his entire bio because I think we're going to get a better sense of his bio by actually speaking with him and going through the interview process. But the reason that we've got him here today is he's the author of Destined to Serve, which is an autobiography that he's written, I think published in 2018, Dr. Endicott, is that right?
Yeah, it actually came out in December of 2019.
Yeah, 19. Okay, gotcha. And among other things, among many, many other things that we'll get into, he was the honorary consul of Mongolia here in Georgia. And that was the capacity in which I interacted with him first as a new reporter coming out of school. He hosted a Mongolian National Day luncheon in Atlanta. And I thought, man, where have I ended up? I'm here at this place where the world is kind of intersecting here. So that was a fascinating event. That was, as I was reading through your book, John, I thought, selfishly, I was looking at the times when my Global Atlanta tenure started and your leaving Atlanta occurred, and they barely overlapped by about a year. And it's been really interesting to watch from afar what you've been able to accomplish in Korea. But again, we're going to back into your time in the military and your extensive career, including 2 Nobel Peace Prize nominations for your work on nuclear nonproliferation, particularly in Northeast Asia, your time at Georgia Tech. You were the founding director of the Center for International Strategy, Technology, and Policy, which is still going strong as far as I understand. And I know that we have some Georgia Tech and Georgia State people on the call here who will be very interested to catch up with what you're doing in the realm of international education. And you're a longtime proponent and participant in international educational exchanges, of which we'll talk about quite a bit. So first of all, let's just jump into it. And then as we go, if y'all have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. There might be a chance, like I said, later for raising of hands. There's a raise hand function, I think, on the bottom. And if Leah could keep y'all in the gallery view and maybe watch for hands that are either waving or mechanical hands that are coming up, perhaps we can do some vocal questions as well. But John, Destined to Serve, as I was reading through the book, and as you look back on your life, I'm sure it seems as if, these things were kind of laid out, this path was there for you, but I'm sure it didn't feel like that at the time. So tell me tell me why you chose the Destined title and what that means to you.
Well, thank you, Trevor, for having me, and Lee. And I see so many names of folks that I know and really appreciate having a chance to talk with you again. And it's really a pleasure to be here. Well, why I chose the name is that as I wrote the book, it dawned on me, my goodness, my father had planned my career and planned my life, not only my career. And it was really very interesting because one of the great things about writing a book like this is you learn so much more about your own family that you didn't really know or you took for granted. You heard it maybe when you were a kid, and now it hits home when you're a little bit older. But just to give you a little bit of background on how my dad did affect me. So he was actually a farm boy in Kansas. And when he was working harvesting wheat one day, they had the threshing machine going, and he took a straw into his eye. And so he was very damaged eye in his left eye, basically almost blind, but not quite. And that prohibited his participation in World War I and also World War II. And that bore a really heavy burden on my father. He really wanted to serve, and he didn't. And so as life goes on, I said, wow, he put me in the place that ended up where he wanted to be, I think, at one time. So maybe I lived his life, but he, as I look back, he first of all put me in an airplane when I was 4.5. And my sister, who just passed away last November, sorry. She was 88. But her dad asked her, what would you like to do for your birthday? And she says, I want to go fly in an airplane. And so everybody went out to Lincoln Airport, and Dad and Alice were getting on the plane. And Alice said, why doesn't John come? And Dad said, of course he should come. So I got in the plane also, and we flew around. And then about, that was June of 41. And then by July, Dad sent us all, my sister, Mom, and myself, to Kansas. That's where all the relatives lived. And we usually did that every summer. And so this time we went by TWA and flew. So here again, I was less than 5. I had 2 wonderful opportunities when many kids, of course, were never near an airport or flying. So that was really something. Then in 41 also, he takes me to the World Series game. Cincinnati Reds were in the World Series that time. And of course, he buys me a toy. And the toy he bought was a pot aluminum dirigible with Nazi markings on them. And of course, we weren't at war yet. And Cincinnati is a very, very German town. So I'm sure those dirigibles sold quite well. And so that's the last metal toy that I had until the war was over. And so it was a really important toy. And I remember trying to, you put it on a cable and threw it across the room. And it was just something that I remember really, but there we are again.
Yeah.
Also, he was an industrial arts teacher and the woodshop teacher. And so he made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of airplane recognition models, so that he would make both Japanese and German models. And of course, they were all painted black, but the pilots used those to gain recognition for the airplanes when they flew. Well, anything that had a sort of a problem with it, a crack or something like that, ended up in my bedroom. So again, here I am flooded with all sorts of Axis aircraft to be around. And that was really very, very.
So you've flown, and now you're surrounded by airplanes, and
that's right.
You sort of have a visceral kind of understanding of,
and probably once a month we would go out to Lincoln Airport and sit by the end of the runway, so we could watch airplanes take off. I mean, here we are, okay, getting inoculated with the love of air.
But not everyone sees what their father's doing and then kind of inherently follows after that, right? Like, was that something that you felt consciously, or was it something that you just realized down the road, like looking back maybe through
Oh
this
yeah, it was
exercise
a
too?
looking back kind of thing.
Mm.
Also, all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh my goodness, Dad really wanted me to go in the Air Force. It was
Hmm.
very clear. And I can remember Lincoln Airport became the secondary airport, and Cincinnati went to the Kentucky for its international airport.
Hmm.
And we didn't have a car because we lost our car at the beginning of the war when Dad forgot to put antifreeze uh, in the car. He put it in the back seat and not in the engine. And that night it froze and broke the block. And so we were without a car for the entire war. But
Wow.
at the end of the war, we walked from our house to the new Kentucky Cincinnati airport, which is a good hour and a half walk.
Mm.
And we did that just to see the B-36s that were going to make a flyover. And they flew over
Mm.
about 20,000 feet. I mean, it was, we could hardly see them. But this
Hmm.
is another one of those things that was just, great.
Yeah. Well,
Then one
I
of the
want.
most important things of his life is he applied to serve the Army as a teacher. And this is after the war, this is 46. And he applied to go to Japan. And the 8th Army hired him, and he went there for 1 year.
Mm.
And basically became very knowledgeable about Japan, and then came back and went on the Methodist Church speaker circuit. And he would always take me with him. And so
Mm.
he would be making a speech talking about what's going on in Japan. And I would be there, listening and gathering all that background.
Absorbing.
And
Was that
then,
so there was that exchange early on for you, and then you also went to England. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your time in England
well,
for, I think you spent a year there, and how that impacted your studies, because as far as I understand, before that you were interested in politics. You read, y'all sat around the radio and listened to the news at night. But you also, your main goal was to become the Cincinnati Reds or other
that's
Major League
right.
Baseball player.
When I was
So,
14, anybody asked me what I wanted to do, I'd say, I'm going to play baseball, become famous, and go into politics. That was it. And
that was the route, and actually it looks like now you would have been right on, because there's so many, public figures going into politics these
well,
days.
Cincinnati just sold its prime pitcher, Bauer, and we're going to be also ran again next year. But Dad did such a good job coming back to Cincinnati and talking about Japan throughout the public school system that I actually got a Fulbright exchange opportunity, one of the first to go to London and teach for a year. And that was just basically unbelievable for me, because if you see Harry Potter, the Paddington Technical High School that I went to was in an old building that could fit right in with the Harry Potter. Maybe it was a set something. But the distinctive thing about Paddington Tech was its headmaster. And the headmaster was just a wonderful person. If there's anybody, if I had the ranking of people I respect the most, my father would be first, and John A. Hewlett, who is the headmaster, is second. And I'll never forget, the English speaking union was in charge of finding a school for me. And so they found London Polytechnic. And so I went and interviewed with their headmaster. And the first thing he says, John, well, how much foreign language have you had? And I said, well, I've had German since 7th grade, but it's not serious German. It's sort of keep you busy German. And he said, then you haven't had any Latin? And I said, no, we haven't had Latin. And we don't start serious things like that till the 9th grade, which I was going in to. And then he said, that means you don't have any French either, right? And then he says, they said, what about algebra? And I said, well, we start that in the 9th grade also. He said, John, I don't think you're going to fit in here. And so he said, in order to make your year much more enjoyable, I'm going to call a friend of mine. And the friend was John Endicott, headmaster of Paddington. And Paddington Tech was a secondary, actually, they had a 3-tier system in those days. Secondary modern was they taught everybody how to push brooms. Then the technical school was they taught people to be managers in a factory. And then, of course, the private schools for pre-college. So this was a technical school. And it was the same curriculum as we were using in Ohio at that time. So it was perfect. And, but I learned a lot from him because on the Friday we visited, he said, okay, John, you're coming on Monday and report in. And he said, you don't have to wear a uniform because you're only going to be here for 1 year. And the uniforms cost a lot of money. And then he called an immediate meeting of all the boys. This is a boys' school, and there were 200 boys. And he called this meeting Friday afternoon, and he got up on the podium and he said, anybody, he said, we're going to have an American join us, and anybody who even touches him, we're going to have to deal with me. And so he laid down the law, and it made it, the British, bless their hearts, have taken bullying to an art. I mean, it is unbelievable. And so I was very lucky. They didn't bully me, but I did learn how to be diplomatic, run fast, and whatever. It was a great opportunity. One time I remember the Air Force dropped some bombs on British lines during the Korean War. This is 1950. And so I came to school and there was a group of about 15 kids waiting at the gate for me. That's a gauntlet I had to run through because they didn't like it. So there's a lot of different things, but he was constantly pushing me to do things that I probably would not have done. They had a fall camp in October where the entire school would go to a camp actually near Portsmouth, England. And it was optional. And my dad and mom said, okay, if you don't want to go, we won't go. But he came over to the house and he talked with the parents and he said, look, this is an opportunity for your son that will never happen again. And so it was unbelievable. We got to go to Nelson's ship, the Victory, and tour that. And it was just unbelievable 2 weeks.
Wow.
He also said, John, you have to learn the British system of government. And so he got me 3 passes to the Strangers Gallery in Parliament. And one day when the actual member took me, we were having lunch in the members' cafeteria, so to speak. And Churchill comes by about 6 inches away. I didn't meet him, but I sure saw him. And that made another major impact on my.
Wow. Well,
So
I wanted to get back to when you came back to the U.S. and sorry to jump in, but before I went too far, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that the Atlanta Global Studies Center is actually our sponsor of this series, and I should have mentioned that beforehand. But they are a collaborative center, federally funded center between Georgia State and Georgia Tech, and have done a lot to really knit together the international education ethos in the city. And they're also a major player in the Atlanta Peace Initiative, which is this effort to kind of bring a Nobel secretariat of sorts here to Atlanta.
I remember that.
I'm sure they're going to want to talk to you about that, I'm sure. But and Shebnem Ozkan is on the call as well. And I'm sorry, Shebnem, I should have had you jump in at the beginning, but I appreciate you joining, and I appreciate your sponsorship. But I think that's actually a good segue because we're talking about international education, and you really came back from England transformed in multiple ways, right? Like you as far as I recall, your family was a staunch Republican family, supportive of the Cincinnati Tafts, as you called them. And I remember one comment that struck me in the book was that you really sort of started to get your own sense for the world at that time, and particularly when your teacher was tasked you with debating. I think, was it pro-McCarthyism, or did you have to criticize?
I had to defend McCarthy, and I thought, what an honor to be able to defend its spokesman for the American way. And so, of course, we had no internet, and we were given 2 weeks to prepare. And so we had a Carnegie Library, maybe half an hour walk from our house. And so every night for 2 weeks, I would go, and had a wonderful librarian who just said, okay, John, let's make this case together. And I realized day after day after day that there was no case for this guy. He was a terrible jerk, and he was, he should not have been in the Senate. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to basically break the cocoon, I guess. And from that time on, I didn't take what my parents said as gospel. I actually questioned it. And that led to my real stress here at Solbridge on debate. And our debate team is run through Asia like Sherman ran through Georgia. And I'm sorry to say that, but I am an Ohioan. Don't forget. And so coming back home was really a treat. It was also an opportunity to realize that I'm giving up baseball, and I gave it up. And I'm so glad I had the experience in London, though, because they knew I was a catcher, and they said, okay, we play cricket in our school, and it's time for you to be a wicket keeper, which is basically a catcher in cricket. And I learned, never to be a silly short leg or these kinds of things. And it was a wonderful sport. I wish it was more respected in America. But it's those kinds of things that made such an impression on me at that time. And those are the kinds of things I try also to reflect in our international education here.
Well, fast forward a bit, you went to the Ohio State University, correct?
Yes,
and you ended up in the Air Force ROTC program. How did you come about that decision? I think a good way to kind of set us up for the rest of our discussion too is, you came to these points in your life where you had to sort of make big decisions about where to end up, where you think you would best be following your passions and your skill set. And I think a lot of folks, especially my age and younger, are trying to figure that very thing out, in the midst of the throes of life and everything that's coming at you. So I want to back into kind of how you made these big decisions, transformative decisions for your life. But how did you end up, going the Air Force route? I mean, at that point, you didn't realize that your dad was kind of pushing you that way, but and then do a really quick abridged version of how you got to Japan, I think, because that's our next jumping.
Well, I really hate to tell you this because it's such a pedestrian story, because I get to Ohio State, and in those days ROTC was required. All able-bodied men had to do 2 years of ROTC in the state colleges throughout the nation. And so I had to make the decision. And so I was really allergic to poison ivy. And I could see myself in the Army having to crawl through a patch of poison ivy and getting poison ivy all over me. So Army was out. Navy, I couldn't swim. Navy was out. The Air Force was the only option. And so I got Air Force ROTC, and it was required the first 2 years. The second 2 years paid 90 cents a day. There's no question I went into the Air Force for that 90 cents a day. And it really shows the difference in university costs now and what it was.
Yeah.
Well, but I majored in poli-sci. I was a music minor. I played the French horn, and I actually, when I graduated, I was offered fourth principal at the Columbus Symphony. And of course, the Air Force said, no, John, you've got a job to do. And so that eliminated that option. And I was a Russian minor also, so Russian language. And I really wanted, of course, when I graduated, I became a second lieutenant. And I also was asked where I wanted to go. And I said, well, I just studied Russian language 4 years and all stuff about Russia. I want to go to Russia. Second lieutenants do not go to Russia. And so they said, where next would you like to go? And I said, Japan. And
But
so,
one question, was it inevitable that you were actually going to go from ROTC to being a commission, being
yes,
actually
yes, that was
actively
part of it.
enlisted? Okay. When you did that
Yeah.
second 2-year commitment?
The second 2 years, the advanced ROTC was entry into the military, basically.
Okay.
And
And I wanted to actually ask you one question. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. I feel like you mentioned everybody, all men especially at that point, went into ROTC and it was required in the state schools. Do you feel that there is kind of a need at all to reintegrate military and civilian life in the country now a little bit better? I feel like we sort of drifted from,
well, I'll give you an
we
answer.
see wars as over there and people enlisting as going somewhere else versus, I'm from Columbus, Georgia, which is, home of Fort
Oh, yeah.
Benning. So you can not really avoid it in Columbus, but at the same time, there's still this kind of separation. And I wonder, if maybe there's a way to restructure our societal contract, I guess, with the way we defend ourselves.
Since I'm not going to go into politics, I'll give you what I really believe. And, the military in those days when we had a draft was the own shared social experience for everybody, every male who was eligible. And my first unit that I had about maybe 12 or so enlisted men. And I had a Harvard graduate. I had kids off the farm. I had blacks, I had Asians. I mean, it was a melting pot. And we built a unit that actually bonded and worked together. That's gone now. The only folks who go in the military want to go in the military or have to go for financial reasons. And it actually gave a shared social experience. I think it's just something that is essential for our country because we are so disparate and we have so many ethnic groups, etc. We've got to come together. And I don't think it has to be military, but national service. And those who wish to go to the military, that's wonderful. Those who wish to do a couple of years national service and in any kind of way that contributes to the making of America is great. So
yeah, I had a feeling that you might say that, and I think that's the fact that you use the term shared social experience is really interesting to me because I run across every now and then some countries that still have compulsory military service, right, and or have had it up until recently. And I remember interviewing one of our former Swiss consuls general, and him talking about in Switzerland having served when he was younger. And had the exact same experience. There are people in my country that are completely different ethnicity, status, socioeconomic class. He remembered being on a train and having a poorer kid from the mountains standing on the train platform and not knowing what to do. He didn't know how to get on the train. Like he was looking at it as if it was an alien spaceship or something. And he said that really struck him at like this person that lives in my country has not been on a train before. And I think that we have fewer and fewer opportunities to kind of interact in that way. We're especially in the world of technology and social media, when we can kind of curate our own information sources. I think that there's
one
a sore need
story
for
that I'd like to tell on that subject deals with the dear beloved Zell Miller. I really loved Zell. And of course, Zell was in the Marine Corps. And he told me the story. He said, John, I went in the Marine Corps, and he said, and I went to bed one night and I woke up next to a black man. I'd never seen one before up close. And he said, I didn't know what to do. And he said, but John, he became my best friend and he saved, my ass or whatever many times. And he said, it's just a wonderful thing. And he was one of those persons who was really sold on the utility of the shared social experience
Mm.
and the
Wow.
breakdown in ethnic, issues.
Yeah,
He's a wonderful,
definitely.
wonderful guy.
Well, let's go back to Japan. So, how do you feel that you chose Japan because your dad knew it, and he had
Oh,
been there,
oh
and
yeah.
you had listened, you had absorbed all those
I had
Methodist
taken
church
some
talks?
courses on Japan in the university, but also it was, just reinforcing what I had already brought um, to the game, because my dad just really, really inundated me with a lot of
Hmm.
stuff. And so it was my chance to validate what dad had done. And it was a wonderful opportunity.
Hmm.
It was 1958, and Burma had just been taken over by Ne Win. So the cycle comes around every once in a while.
Hmm.
And I was in the intelligence unit, and it was just so much, it was very fun or odd,
Hmm.
because here I am, Caucasian, trying to do intelligence collection efforts. And I stood out like, a tomato in an apple
Yeah.
basket. But anyway, it was a good opportunity. And I started going to church. I was raised Southern Baptist in Cincinnati. And so I started going to church in Tokyo at the Tokyo Union Church, which is an interdenominational church. And so one day after services, we had a coffee clutch, and I was drinking coffee, and a lady comes up to me who's probably at that time about 65, silver haired, and she says, "Hello, I'm Florence Wells." And Florence Wells is the one person my father told me, make sure you meet Florence Wells. She's a Methodist missionary in Tokyo. And of course, I had not taken any effort to meet her.
Wow.
I was 23. And so here I am. I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm John Endicott, Charlie's son." And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce the lady next to me." And so she introduced to Nizu uh, Mitsuyo Kobayashi. And Miss Kobayashi and I looked at each other, talked a little bit, and I was smitten. I mean, that was it. So it was love at first sight, and no going back. And so that was in October, and by actually August the next year in '59, we were able to get married. But the time in between is a real story of
Well, yeah, tell us about
determination.
that. Tell us about that, because I mean, especially my generation, right? I don't even think I can appreciate what y'all went through to try to get
Well,
married. So,
as you enter the military, you enter from the state that you come from, and those state laws govern you throughout the course of your career. And in most states, probably maybe not half, but almost half the states in 1958, 59 had anti-miscegenation laws, and therefore it was against the law to get married to somebody of different race. Ohio has no such law. And so it came down to the existence. I remember going to the legal officer, and he was, "Boy, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I want permission to get married." And he said, "What state are you from?" And I said, "Ohio." And he goes to this big book and opens up the page in Ohio. "Blankety blank blank, you can get married." And so it was legal to get married, but the institution was not in favor of it. And
well, and
therefore,
I'd imagine you being an intelligence officer too, marrying, Japanese might not.
big, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No,
And we're not so far removed, right, from the war and from the internment camps and everything like that. So,
Oh,
I
yes.
mean,
One of the things I was doing was interrogating or talking to Japanese who were coming out of Soviet prisoner of war camps. This is 1958.
Mm-hmm.
officers and enlisted men just coming back home
Wow.
after doing pretty hard work in well, places like Mongolia. I think
Mm-hmm.
Japanese labor built the foreign ministry building, is a fact, in Ulaanbaatar. And so most of the good buildings that were built in the Soviet Union, at least in the Asian part, were built by Japanese labor.
Mm.
And so, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on. The nice thing about it is my wife's father was a pharmacist and had placed first in the Tokyo Pharmaceutical University, but many of his professors were Austrian or German professors. And it was not unusual for him to see mixed marriages. And so that was a major asset.
Mm.
And the other asset was that I had taken German during my elementary school and in the high school, through high school. So I spoke maybe elementary, but not bad German. But he had also trained in German. And therefore, when we met each other, we communicated in German, not Japanese or English. And that's another reason to study language.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, definitely. And I want to get into that too later on, because you have sort of your lessons for life. And I think that that's one of them. But you know, talk about destined, right? I think that gauntlet that you had to run through to get married, and now that you've been with Mitchie for 60 plus years, I think it's pretty clear that that was meant to be. And
well, that was part of the mortar. I mean, the difficulties that we had made the love that much more viable.
Yeah, and to your credit, in the autobiography, you're constantly coming back to how important she has been in underpinning everything that you've been able to do. So
in my, I guess in the intro or somewhere on the book, I always say, of all the things I did in life, the best thing I did was marry my wife. So it's very clear. I'm still smitten.
Well, and there were a lot of things that had a lot of moves. You ended up going to Hawaii.
Well, see, that's where they sent me. 7 days after we applied to get married, I was in Hawaii. That was the exile place. And what a wonderful place to be exiled, because when we finally got through the paperwork and were able to get married legally, my assignment was Hawaii. So we go from Japan to Hawaii and have a wonderful, mixed racial community. And it was the best thing for us. My parents were 5,000 miles away. Her parents were 5,000 miles away. And we had to settle everything, between ourselves. Yeah. And it really was a great opportunity. And we had many, of course, Japanese and Hawaiian Japanese friends, Korean friends, Philippine friends, you name it. They were in Hawaii.
They didn't let you, and we got one question already about your interaction with the Philippines. Maybe we'll come back to that. But, so they didn't let you stay comfortable for too long. I remember, your compatriots played a little bit of a prank on you and acted like you were being sent to North Dakota, which apparently might as well have been Siberia. But it wasn't that far away that you actually got sent, and that was into Omaha, Nebraska.
I had been trained as a nuclear targeting officer there in Hawaii, and so it came time for my reassignment, and the mailroom clerks were a bunch of young enlisted men, and I wasn't that old myself, and so they made a set of orders that looked exactly like the real thing, and had me going to why not North Dakota? And it was made right by the end of the day. I was actually assigned to SAC headquarters. And it was a really wonderful opportunity. And so from Hawaii, we go to Omaha. And Omaha was also a wonderful, receptive environment for mixed race family. And I can't say enough about the folks from Nebraska.
Well, I want to do, yes, definitely. And I want to do rapid fire sort of, these three big epical moments in your military history that ended up, I think, probably driving some of your nuclear nonproliferation work, right? So talk about I know that you went to Moscow in 2012 to talk about your experience during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962,
It was the
being
50th
in,
and
the
so
50th anniversary. And so you
so
had
19,
that, and then we had uh, the Pueblo incident when North Korea attacked our ship, and then
right.
what was the other one that we wanted to talk about? There was one more. The Tet Offensive when you were stationed in Vietnam. So like, let's go Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, and Pueblo incident real quick, and how those affected your
Well,
later work.
I have been committed to arms control ever since October 1962.
Mm,
And of course, that's when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. I was in the war room, 3 stories underground in Omaha, and contributing to the creation of the war plan. And of course, the Cuban thing broke out, and we were working away. And one day, the 3-star lieutenant general, who was our boss up on the surface, came down and said, "Well, man, we have maybe 20 minutes before execution."
mm,
And he said, "Why don't you call your spouses and say goodbye?" Because we were in a bunker 3 stories below ground, would probably last a day or two. But anybody on the surface would be evaporated because SAC headquarters is one of the biggest prime targets for the nuclear response. And so that's what we heard from down in the underground. And of course, I was daily working on the weapons, etc., for the targets in the Soviet Union. And that was my business, to understand what would have happened. And I knew what would happen. And so none of us would be here. I could say none of us would be here. And the sad thing is that when this was all over, President Kennedy invited all the chiefs of staff, Army, Navy, Air, into the Oval Office and congratulated them on the support he had during the crisis. And the last person out of the office was General LeMay. And LeMay said, "Mr. President, we just participated in the greatest betrayal of the American people ever." And so he wanted to go to war and use, of course, in those days, America's preponderance over the Soviet Union was really visible, even though they were saying there was a missile gap and all this sort of stuff. America was really loaded for bear, and Russia was not. So that was the end of it. And of course, living through that, I realized that, like many other people did, I mean, this became the hallmark of the arms control movement, because we all said, "Hey, we went too far. We almost went over the cliff." And the first thing that happened was a hot telephone line between, of course, Moscow and Washington and SAC and all this. And from there, of course, the arms control regimes that happened. And of course, just recently, the re-signing of the START Treaty. So those weapons actually ended up bringing the Soviet Union and the United States closer together. And that's basically the whole idea that I had in mind with the limited nuclear weapons free zone for Northeast Asia. That here's something that's more important, more threatening than any of the regional, territorial or historic or colonial legacies that irritate people. Here is life or death by nuclear weapons. And I thought everybody could agree that this is something that is important and that should be reasoned with. And so we made a lot of progress. But the second big thing was, of course, the Pueblo crisis.
Well, let's actually just jump ahead, because I think I want to have some time for questions from the audience, and y'all are welcome to just chat at me or wave at me or something. Perhaps I can see you. I've got it on gallery view, so I'm going to try to see as many people as possible. There's also a hand raise button at the bottom, so I might be able to see you there. But because I think we can get so deep into these crises that maybe we miss some of the bigger issues. You know, I wanted to get to Atlanta, and you know how we're skipping over the Institute for National Strategic Studies, right? And you made the director there, and there was a lot into that that colored your later experience, I think. But what I found interesting was that the whole startup process of just getting these talks going among the various parties, because you had multiple countries with different objectives. You had this limited free zone. What does limited mean? For one, you had to determine what that is. And then you had to basically convince people to come to the table. And now it's been, what, 13 different plenary sessions over the last 30 years?
We started in 1990, basically, when the North and South were making real progress in the denuclearization and non-aggression pact here that happened in 91. And when that happened, of course, I said, because America finally admitted that they were taking weapons away from Korea. So I said, well, if America has no weapons in Korea, there's no reason it couldn't live with a nuclear-free zone concept. But unfortunately, the definition that the United Nations uses for nuclear-free zone is it has to be complete. It has to be absolute. So if you're in that arrangement, you can't own, produce, manufacture, store, anything like that of a nuclear weapon. And of course, in the zone that we had created, Russia, China, and the United States happened to be. Therefore, I said, it's got to be limited. And we will allow the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese to have weapons, but they would be controlled. Everybody would lose something, and in the process, gain some sort of, hopefully, progress in confidence. It was a confidence building effort. And it was a process. And of course, that was something that the arms control community in the United States, it was really funny, could not live with. And they would say, Endicott, cease and desist working on this nuclear-free zone stuff. And the State Department, on the other hand, which actually controls the arms control community, said, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Keep going at it, John. So it was, I threw the letters away from the arms control folks and kept the letters from the State Department. And so we kept working on it.
Well, I know that you eventually, when you went to Woosong, you had to run a business school. And you mentioned in the book that was a challenge that you had not run into before, but it sounds like you're running into some of the same problems that startups do. How do you prove out your concept, and how do you keep going amid criticism? And so I'm sure that those experiences sort of informed your later teaching at your business school at Solbridge.
The real kickoff was basically when, in March of '95, I had done a lot of preliminary work and a lot of visits to all the countries in the area, except North Korea. I always went to the United Nations for North Korea because I knew too much about the nuclear war plan. So I go to North Korea. And so I brought 5 people together in March of '95 for 5 weeks. And Katja Weber might remember that at Georgia Tech, because most conferences happen 2 or 3 days and everybody goes home. Right. And I said, if we don't come to an agreement, it's not going to happen in 2 or 3 days. It's got to happen over time. And so actually, we had planned for a 5-week meeting. And I got a 4-star Korean general, 3-star Japanese general, 2-star Russian general, a 2-star Chinese general, and myself. I was actually civilian 3-star. And the whole idea was to bring together people who have been in war so that they would not be accused of being blue sky, dreamers. We have experience fighting, and we want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And so the 5 of us met for 5 weeks. And in the 3rd week, Mitzi, my wife, said John, you got to do something. Your hair is growing white. It's going out. It was the worst 3 weeks of my life because nobody could agree. And so one of the guys that worked for me was from Nashville, and he says, why don't we go to the Grand Ole Opry? And so we rented a 10-passenger van, and I drove, and we went to Nashville. We saw all the sights. And that evening, we went to the Grand Ole Opry, and everybody was having a great time. So we come back, and of course, Mount Eagle is in between Atlanta and Nashville. And going up the hill was fine, the mountain. But as soon as we got to the summit, it became ice-packed and snow. And of course, the van at this time is doing circles going down with a 500-foot precipice to our right. and you know, no more small talk. Everybody was grinning, you know. And
yeah, one of the lines in the book was, I recommend that you know, if you need a breakthrough, have a near-death experience with your
if you're
fellow
negotiating,
negotiators.
near-death experience with all your negotiators is the best thing possible. And so we got back that next Monday. Okay, let's get together, and they all came to an agreement. And so we had what we called the basic agreement, is what we call it.
Mhm.
And we took that to San Francisco, Boston, Washington, New York, to make sure that the arms control community throughout America were quite vested and versed in our idea. And the only place that we ran into any opposition was in Washington, National Press Club. That's in Washington. Yeah. We gave a session to the National Press Club. And an Indian reporter got up and said, don't you realize, and he was accusing the Japanese general of being a traitor because he was willing to give up nuclear weapons, you know, for Japan. And that's the only time that we had any problem. And so we had wonderful cooperation with everybody. And for 13 plenary sessions throughout the world, we started it in Europe and, well, in South America, actually, in Buenos Aires, which was our first meeting. And it was great because we brought 25 negotiators to meet with 25 of the Foreign Service of Argentina, who had just finished the Treaty of Tlatelolco, the South American nuclear-free zone. We had a tutorial. It was just the best thing we could ever have. And then we moved on to Bordeaux and Helsinki, and Moscow, and places in Europe. And then finally started to hit Tokyo and of course Seoul.
Yeah.
And,
well,
never made it to North Korea.
Well, I definitely want to come back to, I think,
And Mongolia.
Yes, for sure. Mongolia, which got you the consular position and much more. But I wanted to come back and sort of wrap some of that together, because it was interesting to me getting toward the end of the book where, you know, we didn't even really talk about Georgia Tech. So you're at Georgia Tech, you're doing all this to start the center, you're hosting all these meetings with the plenaries. You talked a lot about the players in internationalizing Georgia Tech, including some of the former presidents, and of course your mentor and friend Dan Papp, who went on to be Kennesaw State University president. So there's a lot of Atlanta players that are mentioned there that I think people need to get the book to find out about. But you know, when you end up in South Korea at Woosong University, and you host I think it's the 12th plenary there, 12th or 13th, and that to me was kind of a moment where all of your different hats were put on at the same time, and all of your different things came together. Your international education hat, your arms control hat, and your entrepreneurial hat at the same time. So I want to ask you a little bit more about that, and I'm willing to go a little bit longer than 11, but we do have some questions coming in. Some people are just saying how great it is to hear from you and how great it is to be reconnected in some cases. And again, if anybody has a hand raised and you want to actually ask your question, you're welcome to. But one person, let's see, was asking about your most memorable cross-cultural experience. And I thought, I don't know if you want to tackle that one, and then we can jump into a few other ones.
I think getting married
Yeah.
was the most And basically at Solbridge, we have now about 1,650 students. Only 30% are Korean. All the rest are international. And the largest language spoken now at Solbridge after Korean, but I mean, everything is in English, but the students, 30% come from Korea. But the largest language now is Russian, because we have Russians, we have Uzbeks, we have Kazakhs, and all the other, CSI countries coming in. Plus, of course, now quite a few from South America and Southeast Asia, of course, heavy. But 70 to 75% of the school is international. And then our faculty is 80% international. And the students come from about 65 different nations, and the faculty come from about 12 different nations. And everything is in English. But we used to require until this year that everybody took either Korean, Japanese, or Chinese. But this year we've lessened that and made that an option.
Wow. So, and I also, you've done a lot to incorporate the cultures of your students into your university life. I read that. And you also learned a bit about the working culture in Korea. I remember, you put together this advisory board. You're trying to get people to come together, and you had some hardships there. And also, when you were trying to get the Georgia Tech alumni together, that was one of your lessons learned. That you need to.
The Georgia Tech alumni was a wonderful opportunity. It was our second year, I guess, and the Georgia Tech Alumni Association said, "Would you host the meeting for all of Korea?" And so we said, wonderful opportunity, yes. And so we sent out, I guess, about 400 invitations to Koreans who had graduated from Georgia Tech. One showed up. And the reason being a college alumni, it's not a big deal. It's your high school that you go to. That's really the big thing in Korea. And so that was the first lesson that we learned, among many. Yeah.
For sure. Well, most of the comments here, just how great it is to hear about these cross-cultural interactions. We had one question about North Korea, and I kind of wanted to sneak this in with 3 minutes left. Obviously we can't avoid the idea that these issues of arms control are still prevalent right now, right? And they dominate international headlines, and particularly under Trump, when this idea came about that we could use personality and our negotiating skills to just affect these changes that have eluded people for decades, right? So when you see that kind of mentality, I mean, is there some credence to it, to leaders and personalities mattering a great deal, or do you see, having worked on these issues for so long with so many different players, is that kind of a pie in the sky approach?
Well, North Korea has to get one fundamental demand or request satisfied, and before they do anything. And Donald Trump could not have done that alone either, because they wished it to be completely secure in their relationship with the United States. I don't know how many times North Korean negotiators have said, we would like to do something else and something else, but our relationship with America has to be put on a sound foundation. And I got the answer that just blew my mind. We want America to be our older brother and enter into basically a Confucian relationship, where they would be the younger brother and would follow us relentlessly. But they want that kind of trust between the two countries. And that's not going to come through barnstorming and things like that.
Do you see an interesting parallel there with Japan? I remember reading, the Chrysanthemum and the Sword, about, how Japan was able to switch so quickly from being an enemy of the U.S. to being an ally. I mean, relatively quickly. And a lot of that had to do with the emperor coming on the radio, from what I understand. But like, could we see a quick shift if we can get the framework right? That's kind
I
of
had
the
a
question.
wonderful experience that almost sets the whole thing in order. Out in the countryside, talking with Japanese farmers about the success of the American occupation, Japanese farmer looks at me and said, well, MacArthur, the emperor couldn't have chosen a better guy. I mean, he and most of the Japanese went into this whole deal thinking that the emperor appointed MacArthur. Okay, MacArthur's there, appointee of the emperor, and therefore we obey him with no problem. So
Yeah.
that's how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
and that same like mentality of respect and nation's placement in terms of the hierarchy, I think was really interesting. I think I'm going to stop here. If anybody has any burning questions, I'd be willing to stay on for a few more minutes. We've got one question about South Korea's economy, but I really want to respect everybody's time. So if there's no questions right now, then we'll probably wrap it up. But I just wanted to thank the Atlanta Global Studies Center again. I know, Dr. Endicott, they'll be contacting you. All this about your arms control legacy, I think, will be, obviously a touch point for folks at Georgia Tech who are involved in security, but also I think the Global Studies Center and their peace initiative that's trying to center Atlanta as a place where Nobel laureates and others can come together to learn more about the practice of peace. I think you'll probably be getting some calls about that. And particularly your story about having all these people come to Atlanta, and even you mentioned in the book, North Koreans coming to Atlanta, and Delta flying them down from New York, and the corporate community kind of coming along to support some of your efforts. That was fascinating.
Always be grateful for Delta and what they did. They provided first class to major diplomats and tourist class for 11 others.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a wonderful thing. So, we got a lot of help from corporate Atlanta. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
Coca-Cola,
yeah.
Coca-Cola also.
Mm-hmm. And you were able to raise funds from a lot of foundations that were working on nuclear work. We had one question. I think I'll end on this. This is from Lee Villegas, a former Global Atlanta editor who interacted with you quite a bit during your time. And she asks, what, do you follow the work of Georgia Tech Center for International Strategy, Technology, and Policy? And what do you see as the most significant changes recently at Georgia Tech? And, I'm sure you've got, I think you got an agreement between Solbridge and Georgia Tech early on. And maybe use that as a question to set the stage, tell us about the last decade, basically, actually, what do you see at the changes at Georgia Tech and its international stature, and then what you're doing now, and we'll stop it there.
Well, Georgia Tech is the most respected school. I can't stress how many times when I was a colonel in the Air Force, or then when I became director of the Institute, and I would introduce myself and in Korea, and okay, yes. But when I would come and I'd say, I'm professor from Georgia Tech. Oh, Georgia Tech, I got a son or a daughter and we need some help. It was always, they respected Georgia Tech so much. And of course, now Georgia State, I'm getting a lot of folks who would like to do PhDs at Georgia State, which and they have done at least one that I can remember.
Well, and you talk in the book about that not being inevitable, right? There was a time when at least us UGA folks derided it as the North Avenue Trade School, as you mentioned.
Yes,
and
right.
So the fact you kind of lay out in the book that there was a vision that had to come to fruition, and that's being carried out now as a kind of globally engaged. Place.
Georgia Tech, especially because of the Olympics, is a far different place than it was before the Olympics, and it's become an international player. And for that reason, it's a wonderful institution. And of course, it has a new president, and my wishes for him and also all those at Georgia Tech are leading. I hope.
Definitely. Well, it looks like y'all are still having some appetite to stay on here. So I'm gonna ask one question. Nobody's dropping. Not that many people are dropping off. So we had a question from Colin Brady about your Bronze Star. He said you didn't get that from sitting behind the desk. Tell us about that. And I think that
Oh,
goes back to Vietnam.
that was during a coup attempt. I was the only American in this control center, and of course it was the 522nd Fighter Squadron. I was the advisor to that squadron, and that was General Keyes. Of course, he was the commander of the Air Force, and that was his fighter squadron. And so the Army was trying to take over the government, and so the Air Force, the Army brings out its tanks, and they block the runways, And so the Air Force, of course, clever as they are, they take off on the taxiways instead of using the runways. And of course, the Army guys didn't think about taxiways being also runways. But before they took off, they put on anti-tank missiles. And these are A-1s. The airplane I flew in most of the time as a right-seater, not a pilot, but as a right-seater. I would plan all the strikes and then fly with them to make sure they were carried out correctly. But it was a flying tank. It preceded the A-7, and it was just great. We could take all sorts of hits and still come back. And that coup was then put down because the fighters had anti-tank missiles, and they made a couple of runs over the tanks, and it was clear that the tank drivers did not want to get punched with these missiles.
Yeah,
and so the coup failed. And so that's how I got the Bronze Star. I was one American who was actually telling American headquarters what was going on inside the bunker, basically, that we were in. So.
And you benefited from your Vietnamese language that you had studied. So
right.
there's some. I mean, that's one of your life rules is to A, travel, but B, learn languages. And you had exposure to German, Russian, Japanese, Vietnamese, and now we're a student of Korean.
But don't test me. Don't test me on.
Well, all I can say is 감사합니다 for your for your participation, and I want to give you I want to give you the last word about what's happening at Woosong right now, and how we might see you collaborate with either Georgia Tech or just Atlanta in general in the future.
Well, Woosong is now what's called self-autonomous university. And that's the highest level university in Korea. We received that 2 years ago. And now in May of this year, we will come up for the final review. And if we pass this final review, we'll have that status for the next decade. So it's a really important thing because it really gives us access to a whole lot. But what's happened is that we're focused on response to the fourth industrial revolution. And we have actually now gone from 4 colleges. When I arrived, we were 4, and we added Solbridge, that's a 5th college. We now have 8 colleges. So we have a railroad college, which is very unusual, and international in its scope. We have a digital media and digital convergence college, a health and human services college with 90 nurses a year that have graduated. Also, culinary arts and hotel management. Those are the original 4. Then we added Solbridge, which became the model for the Seoul International School, because the Seoul International School will go back to the 4 Korean colleges, which teach in Korean, and make specific degrees that can be obtained in English from those schools. Then we added on, not my business, but the Endicott College of International Studies was added to become.
I was going to say, let's not be too modest here. We've got the Endicott College too. Don't forget that.
Well, it became the liberal arts school of Woosong, which reminds me of Ivan Allen College.
That's right.
And then finally, this past December, we opened up the J.W. Kim College of Future Studies. And so we really feel that we've got a really super handle on AI and automated robotics and all these kinds of things. And we just received a 2 billion won award for increasing our capabilities in AI.
Amazing.
So we've got lots going on.
Well,
And
I'm certain that we will hear more from you, and we'll see more from Woosong and Solbridge for sure. And we hope to host you in person because, you know, given your experience, we weren't even able to really scratch the surface on a lot of these issues and experiences that you've had. So I'm going to encourage everyone to buy the book. We're going to send you a link where you can buy it in the kind of confirmation email that we send, and hopefully we'll boost those sales a bit and set the tone for the next time you're able to come to Atlanta. I know you maintain a house here and you've got family, grandkids, kids and grandkids here. And we're looking forward to just keeping in touch with you. And I hope to see you on my next visit to Korea. My fingers are crossed. I saw the Consul General of Korea on the call earlier, Consul General Youngjun Kim. He and his office were trying to help me go last year. And of course, COVID had other plans, but I look forward to visiting you on the ground there.
likewise, and I really want to thank everybody for joining in. This is really wonderful. Wonderful.
All right. Thank y'all so
Thanks so
much.
much.
Yeah.
Stay
thanks for all the
safe,
questions and
everybody.
comments. Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.